Welcome to Rooted and Rising Healing. I'm your host, Hallie Roderick, and this space is for women rebuilding after betrayal. Here we make sense of what happened, find truth again, and reconnect with who you really are beyond the pain. Whether you're staying, leaving, or still in the middle, your story matters. Together, we'll explore truth, clarity, and the quiet courage it takes to rise from the wreckage of what was into the wholeness of who you're becoming. You're safe to be here. In the messy middle, in the rebuilding, and in the rising. Let's begin. Welcome back to the Rooted and Rising After Betrayal podcast. I'm Hallie Roderick, your host, and today's episode is a big one. If you've been following along the past few weeks, you know we've been building something sort of layer by layer. In episode 9, we explored your core values, what matters most, and what guides you. In the next episode 10, we named your Bill of Rights, things you deserve simply just because you exist. And last week, we took all of that and talked about creating your own identity statement, sort of a declaration of who you are and what you protect as you rise after betrayal. So today, we're going to take that even one step further. We're going to talk about your narrative, the story that you choose to tell about yourself and your life moving forward. This episode is called You're Not a Victim, Reclaiming Your Narrative, and it builds directly on the identity work that we just talked about. And so in the last episode, we named who you are at your core. Your identity statement can become the fence that sort of protects your inner yard. It creates a boundary around your truth. So here's what we haven't talked about yet. Your identity tells who you are, and the narrative that you tell yourself in your head determines how you live from that identity. So your identity is the root, but your narrative is the fruit. And so sometimes in betrayal trauma, it can deeply impact your narrative or the way that you think inside of your head, the things that you tell yourself. Betrayal can tell you a story about you, one that you didn't choose, one that might have been written in fear, through shock, through survival. And so today I want to talk about how we can change that narrative. Dr. Jake Porter, a well-known therapist in the betrayal trauma world, has a framework or a model called the free to choose model. And in it, he clearly explains what trauma does to choice. So trauma doesn't just hurt. Trauma literally hijacks your brain. It hijacks the amygdala, where hypervigilance takes over, and your memory networks are pretty much disintegrated. And the brain, that hippocampus, starts looping, reviewing the past over and over and over. And your brain pulls you into this story that you didn't choose. And then you might start having thoughts of all of the what ifs and all of the unwanteds and all of the uncontrollables. And this creates a narrative that might sound something like, I didn't choose this life. I didn't choose this marriage. I didn't choose this pain. And so, of course, you feel like the victim of your story because in many ways you are. And I love the way Dr. Porter frames this because it's really important to acknowledge that trauma interrupts our choice and healing restores that choice. And this is where you're at. If you're here with me today, you're following along. Nowhere is that more true than in the story you tell yourself about yourself. And so this is where we want to differentiate two things. You were victimized. That is true. That is real. And that matters. You did not choose this. Your agency was not considered in this. You did not give consent to this betrayal. So what you survived was not your fault. And we don't want to stay in victim position long term. So that's a different thing. So if you find yourself having some of these thought processes like black and white thinking, where it's either this or it's either that, there's no in between, or feeling like I have no choices, there's no options for me here, or if you're waiting for perfect justice to come along before you can move on, if you feel powerless, if you find the narrative in your head sounds like it's coming from the place of try, or I might, or I could, or I should or should have, then you might find yourself more of stuck in a victim position. Okay, so just to be clear, there's a difference between being victimized and staying in a victim position. And that's what we want to talk about today. Because staying in the victim position does not accelerate our growth. It does not allow for healing. So what are some of the things we can do to overcome victimhood? One of those is accepting that it may not be black or white, that there may be nuances to different situations. So if we move from black and white thinking into more nuanced thinking, here's some examples. Black and white thinking might sound like, well, he lied, so nothing he ever says again can be trusted. Nuanced thinking says some of what he says might not be trustworthy right now, and I can evaluate his words and his actions through consistent behaviors over time. Black and white thinking might be if he slips or he struggles, it means he hasn't changed at all. He may struggle and he may be committed to change. So I can watch patterns, his ability to take responsibility, empathy, repair, all of that. Another black and white thinking might be it's either I stay and forgive completely or I leave and give up entirely. Nuanced thinking might sound like, well, I can stay for now and keep observing. I can hold space for my healing while staying curious about what's possible. I don't have to make any permanent decisions today. Another one that I think we can beat ourselves up about is, well, if I'm angry, then that means I'm not healing. I can feel angry and healing at the same time. Anger can actually be a messenger, not just a setback. Here's another one. He hurt me, so he must not care about me. Anybody that loved me would never be able to do this. Nuanced thinking might sound like he caused pain and he may care deeply. Caring isn't the same as being healthy or safe. His care doesn't erase the harm, and the harm doesn't erase the fact that he is got wounding that is unhealed. Here's one related to boundaries of black and white thinking. If I set boundaries, it means I'm cold, mean, or abandoning him. No, nuanced thinking would sound like I can set boundaries and still be compassionate. Boundaries are how I protect connection with myself. Okay, so there's a few examples of how we can move out of that victim position of black and white thinking into more nuanced thinking. So thinking I have no choices is staying stuck in victim position. Making empowered choices, even when they're hard, is how we move out of that. Now, we might not have any choices that feel good right now. We might not like any of our options right now. It's actually pretty common. And we still have options. I kind of hate this phrase, but I've heard people say, either way is going to be hard. Choose your hard. You do have choices, even if either any of the options right now don't feel good. Waiting for perfect justice is staying in victim mode. Acting without perfect justice is helping us move into an empowered place, stepping out of that. If we feel powerless, changing our narrative into, I do have agency. I will make this choice. I can make a decision. Okay. So instead of the I try, I might, I could, I should, you start speaking in I am and I will and I do. Okay. So this is us choosing movement instead of waiting. The waiting keeps us in victim position. It's like we're waiting for someone else to change or to do something different before we can. And we don't want to give that power to anybody else. So that doesn't mean you're ignoring your pain or pretending everything's fine. It means that you get to choose your next chapter. You get to choose how your story is told. And you get to reclaim the pen of your own story. You get to write the rest of your story. So if we think to your identity statement, this can give you a new template to evaluate your narrative. While the old story that was led from that victim mindset might have sounded like I'm powerless, I have no options, I'm broken, my whole past was a lie, I can't even trust myself, my story was ruined, I didn't choose this life. While all of those things might have some truth to them, they don't have to be the reality of your life. So the new story might sound like, I am returning to a sense of self-direction. I am discovering my choices. I protect my worth. I can make meaning out of what happened to me. I am growing, I am learning, and I am rising. I choose how I show up. This is how your identity statement can start to sort of come to life. So here's some things to think about in reframing the narrative, okay? Maybe you might have to write some of these out. I'm a big fan of writing things out to get clarity, but you might want to write out, I used to believe that this is true. And now I know that. So I used to believe that if I was having strong emotions, that must mean I wasn't healing. Now I know that my emotions have a lot to tell me about, and it's okay for me to have emotions and feelings as I'm healing. Here's a couple other ones. I used to believe pain meant I was stuck. Now I know that pain is part of the growth. I used to believe that I had no choices, and now I know choice begins when I face my reality. I used to believe that boundaries were selfish, and now I know boundaries are a sacred protection. I used to believe my story was over, and now I know my story is unfolding. How does that feel as you hear me say that? Does that help you give your brain possibility for changing the narrative already? I hope so. And what I would invite you to consider is, again, just envision the version of you that trusts your identity, that leads her own story, that honors her value, protects her rights, speaks from truth, chooses empowerment, and begins to rise. What choices would you make? What would your voice sound? Picture this version of you. What would her choices be? What would her voice sound like? What would her boundaries be? Picture her freedom. Imagine your future self standing in that realm, not trapped by this story you didn't choose, but guided by truth. Remember that you're writing the new chapter right now, and you hold the pen. You were victimized, and that is true. But you are not the victim of the rest of your story. Every choice you make from here forward becomes a sentence in your new narrative. Every boundary you set becomes proof of your worth. Every truth you speak becomes you declaring that identity. Every step you take becomes evidence that healing is possible. So remember that healing starts now. And again, if this work is resonating with you and you want to dive in a little deeper, please check your show notes to sign up for the waitlist for my new upcoming course, where I'm going to walk you through this step by step and help you start living from the new truth of who you are and stop living in any of the remaining old story that might still be hanging around. Join the waitlist. It's safe, it's supported, and it's your next step. You don't have to do this alone. I hope that you will join me again next week as we continue on this healing path. Thank you so much for being here with me. Thank you for being here with me inside Rooted and Rising Healing. Remember, healing isn't a destination, it's a returning to your truth, to your voice, to the woman you were always meant to be. You have the power to rise at your own pace, in your own way. And when it feels hard, just come back to your breath and remind yourself, still I rise. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love if you shared it with another sister on the journey. And until next time, stay rooted, stay rising. You've got this.